Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a topic that might deeply resonate with many listeners, the often complex ways that trauma can impact your intimate relationships.
Yeah, it's a subject that really touches so many of us, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Whether you're, navigating your own experiences or maybe supporting someone you care about, or even just curious about the complexities of human connection.
absolutely. And for this deep dive, you've pulled together some really illuminating sources for us. We're looking at insights from therapists, right? Specialists in trauma and sexology.
That's right. And also exploring sort of the foundations of what makes relationships healthy and touching on sexuality itself, too.
Okay.
Our goal here really is to pull out the key insights. How does trauma actually affect intimacy and give people some useful knowledge, without it feeling overwhelming?
Okay, great. So let's unpack this link between trauma and intimacy. Where's a good starting point to understand that connection?
Well, I think the first thing to get across is that trauma isn't just, you know, the really obvious overt things like sexual abuse. That's hugely significant, of course.
Right.
But trauma, in all its forms, can basically build these walls,
Yeah.
real barriers against the closeness people want. It often chips away at that basic belief that other people are safe,
Mm.
predictable.
Ah, okay. So vulnerability starts feeling dangerous.
Exactly, like a massive risk. So trauma kind of teaches the body and mind that closeness isn't safe, which leads to these protective reactions that, yeah, block intimacy.
Okay, so that makes sense intellectually, but what might that actually look like? How do those barriers show up day to day?
Well, you might see it in a few ways. Maybe finding it really hard to just be present in intimate moments, feeling distant, or your mind just drifts off somewhere else.
Mm.
Trust issues are a big one, obviously. That makes it incredibly difficult to be really open, truly vulnerable with a partner. Sometimes people even start actively avoiding intimacy altogether. It's like a way to protect themselves from getting hurt again.
Yeah, I can see that. If you've been hurt badly before, open up again must feel incredibly risky.
It really does.
Yeah.
And we also see people struggling just to connect deeply, maybe finding it hard to share their real feelings or feel like their partner truly gets them.
Hmm.
Boundaries, setting and keeping personal boundaries, which are so crucial for a healthy intimacy, that can be incredibly tough if trauma's in your past.
Right. Boundaries can feel threatening, maybe.
Or just confusing, perhaps.
Mm.
And another really common thing people describe is feeling disconnected from their own body, which, as you can imagine, profoundly affects physical intimacy and pleasure.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like trauma can create this really tangled web of difficulties.
It really can. And it often doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Hmm.
It frequently goes hand in hand with things like depression, anxiety, sometimes addiction.
Oh, okay.
And all of those things just add another layer of complexity to forming and keeping those healthy, intimate connections.
Hmm. You know, something that really jumped out at me from the sources was this idea of secondary trauma triggers, how seemingly positive life events can actually stir things up. That feels counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. We usually think of triggers as negative things, right? But these secondary triggers can actually be milestones we normally see as good things, like having kids, moving house.
Really? Even good things?
Yeah, or changes at work or school or even relationship steps like moving in together, getting engaged, getting married. These big life shifts can unexpectedly bring old, unresolved trauma right back to the surface.
Why is that? Why would a good change do that?
Well, it seems they can disrupt your sense of stability, your routine, your feeling of safety in ways that might echo feelings from the original trauma, even if the event itself is positive.
Hmm.
And the important thing here is that even just identifying a recent trigger, whatever it was, can be a huge step. It helps make sense of why intimacy might feel difficult right now.
Okay, that's a really key insight. So we've talked about how trauma creates these barriers, but one of the sources had that very direct title, Unfuck Your Intimacy. So how do you start doing that? How do you begin to address trauma's impact?
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the good news, the really encouraging part, is that healing doesn't always mean you have to rehash every single detail of the trauma itself.
Oh, that's so important. I think there's this myth that you have to relive it all to get better.
Absolutely. And for many people, that can actually be re-traumatizing. The real key is finding an approach to healing that clicks with you. Something that feels right for you, aligns with how you see the world.
Makes sense.
Our sources really stress listening to what they call the survivor's voice, that gut feeling, that inner sense of what feels safe and what you need. It often holds the clues.
So trusting your own instincts in the healing process.
Exactly. And there isn't just one path. There are lots of ways people start to regain that sense of control that trauma often takes away.
Like what, for example?
Well, cultivating self-compassion is huge. Just being kinder to yourself. Some people find healing through, say, political action, trying to change the systems that might have contributed to the trauma.
Right, channeling it outwards.
Yeah, or volunteering, maybe helping others who've been through similar things. That can be incredibly empowering.
I can see that. Finding meaning in it.
Definitely. Or even things like engaging in new activities, maybe something physical like kickboxing, you
Yeah.
know, or prioritizing self-care like massage, things that help you reconnect with your body and feel more in charge again.
Okay.
And specifically for intimacy, one tool that came up is using sensate focus exercises, often with a partner.
Sensate focus. Could you quickly explain what that is and why it's helpful here?
Sure. Sensate focus involves very gentle, structured touching exercises. The goal is really to reduce anxiety around intimacy by shifting the focus away from performance or reaching a specific goal, like orgasm,
Oh.
and putting it purely onto the physical sensations. What does this touch actually feel like? Partners usually take turns, maybe starting with non-genital touch, and just communicate what feels nice, or even just neutral. It helps rebuild safety and body connection slowly, without pressure.
That sounds really gentle. Okay, so even while someone's healing, triggers are still going to happen, right? How do people learn to cope when they get activated in the moment?
Yeah, that's a crucial skill, managing triggers as they happen. The first step is really getting to know your own signs, like tuning into your body. What emotions pop up? What thoughts start racing? What physical feelings do you notice? Becoming aware is key.
Okay, so self-awareness first.
Exactly. Then, once you can spot those signs, the next step is remembering and actually using the coping skills that have worked for you before.
Right, because in the moment, it's easy to forget what helps.
Totally. When you're distressed, your thinking brain kind of goes offline. So it helps to have strategies for remembering. Maybe having a supportive friend you can call, or keeping a list of coping skills handy, or even knowing what things you need to get away from to feel safer.
That makes sense. Planning ahead for those tough moments.
Yeah. And it's not just about managing the bad stuff either. The sources also point out how important it is to acknowledge any positive qualities that might have actually developed because you've had to navigate tough experiences.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, without minimizing the pain at all, many people find they develop real strengths, resilience, empathy, resourcefulness from getting through traumatic events. Recognizing those qualities can be really empowering. It's not about toxic positivity, but acknowledging the whole picture.
Right, finding strength without denying the struggle.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's also helpful to define what feeling safe and secure actually looks like for you now after a crisis.
Hmm.
And maybe developing a personalized safety plan, thinking about what helps you feel grounded, and knowing that plan might need to change over time.
Okay, this all sounds very proactive, which is good. Now, what about when trauma is part of the relationship dynamic itself? It's not always just one person's history, right?
That's a really important point. In any relationship, one or both partners might be dealing with unresolved trauma, and sometimes it's not obvious at all.
Mm-hmm.
One source gave an example of someone revealing a history of sexual abuse to their spouse after 10 years of marriage. It can take a very long time to feel safe enough to share something that vulnerable.
Wow, 10 years. That kind of revelation would definitely shift things in a long-term relationship.
Absolutely. And when trauma is part of the picture in a relationship, patience and understanding are just
Yeah.
crucial. It's so important for the partner to understand that a survivor's body might experience really contradictory feelings during intimacy.
Contradictory feelings, like what?
Like maybe part of them feels okay or even aroused, while another part feels fear or numbness. And the survivor's the only one who can navigate that, choose what to focus on. It can be confusing for them and confusing for the partner to witness.
So for the supportive partner, it really comes down to communication, being empathetic.
Definitely. Open, empathetic communication is key. Expressing care, acknowledging that things might be difficult for their partner, and really affirming that you believe what they're telling you about their experience.
Could you give an example of what that might sound like?
Yeah, something like maybe after intimacy, saying, "Hey, I noticed you seemed a bit distant there. You said you were okay, but I just wanted to check in. I want this to be good for you too." Just opening the door gently.
Okay. So it's about offering support, but not trying to jump in and fix it for them?
Exactly. That's a vital distinction. Your role as the partner is to be supportive, a safe harbor, not to rescue them or take over their healing.
Right.
And just as importantly, the supportive partner has to prioritize their own well-being too. their own needs, wants, self-care. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Yeah.
You can be part of the journey,
Yeah.
but only if you're looking after yourself as well.
That's a critical point for partners. Okay, you mentioned grounding exercises earlier. How do those help break the trigger cycle, especially around intimacy?
Right. Grounding is super useful here because, as the sources explain, our brains tend to predict the future based on the past, especially if the past involved trauma. When a trigger hits, the brain can feel like it's happening again, right now.
Yeah, the re-experience.
Exactly. Grounding techniques basically help you slam on the brakes. They pull your attention deliberately back to the present moment, the here and now. It disrupts that automatic pathway from trigger to re-experiencing.
Okay, so it's about anchoring yourself in this moment, not the past one.
Precisely. And there are sort of three main types of grounding skills: mental, physical, and soothing.
Okay.
Mental grounding uses your thinking brain. Things like mentally running through your schedule for the rest of the day, or listing all the steps to make a cup of tea, something logical and neutral.
Ah, engaging a different part of the brain.
Yeah. Or describing your immediate surroundings in really specific detail. Like, I see 5 green books, 1 blue chair, the clock says 3.15. Quantifying things helps.
Okay, that makes sense. Using observation to pull you back. What about physical grounding?
Physical grounding uses your body and senses. Just noticing your breath, the feeling of air coming in and out, can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You could count breaths or focus on making the exhale longer than the inhale.
Simple but effective, probably.
Often, yeah. Or touching things around you, really focusing on the texture of your jeans, the coolness of a glass, the pressure of your feet on the floor, using your senses to connect to right now.
Right, tactile sensations.
And the third type is soothing grounding. This involves using calming words or phrases like a mantra. It can be something simple like, "This feeling is temporary," or "I am safe right now," or "I've gotten through tough things before." Whatever words feel personally reassuring.
So kind self-talk, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Kind, grounding self-talk.
These sound like really practical tools, things people could actually use, maybe even practice when they're not triggered.
Absolutely. That's the best way, really.
Yeah.
Building these skills into your regular self-care toolbox means they're more readily available when you do need them. It makes a real difference in managing trauma's impact day to day, including in intimate moments.
This has been incredibly insightful, really pulling together some vital pieces. As we wrap up, what are the main takeaways you'd want listeners to hold on to about trauma and intimacy?
I think the biggest thing is just acknowledging the complexity. How trauma and intimacy interact is multifaceted. There's no single story, no easy fix.
Right.
So self-compassion is just non-negotiable. Being kind to yourself as you navigate this, whether it's your own stuff or supporting a partner. Patience is key too, with yourself, with your partner, and communication. Prioritizing open, honest, maybe sometimes difficult conversations with people you trust.
It sounds like really leaning into understanding these dynamics, even though it's hard, can actually lead to, well, deeper self-awareness and maybe even stronger connections in the long run.
I really believe so. By understanding how trauma can show up, you gain the power to navigate its effects with more awareness, more empathy, and hopefully build healthier, more fulfilling, intimate relationships.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through this really important deep dive. For everyone listening, maybe take a moment to consider which of these ideas resonated most with you today. And perhaps think about one small step you might take just to explore this a little further in your own life or relationships. Thanks for joining us.